Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're stepping into a really intricate situation. It involves New York Attorney General Letitia James and former President Donald Trump.
Yeah, and what's really catching eyes right now is this recent criminal referral about mortgage fraud made against James.
Exactly. And we need to sort of unpack how this potentially connects with her past. Very, very public legal fights with Trump.
Absolutely. And we've got, a compelling set of sources to help us figure this out. We'll be looking at some foundational legal ideas from way back, the 1908 Supreme Court case Ex parte Young.
Okay, 1908. Interesting.
Yeah, and then jump way forward to a Reddit thread that's just buzzing with questions about Trump's bond in his civil fraud case. Is it actually adequate?
The bond situation.
Right. Plus, we have news reports from places like the New Republic, Fox News, the Daily Mail. They detail these mortgage allegations against James, Trump's typical reaction.
Predictable, maybe.
Well, yeah. And the broader themes, too, Executive power, potential retaliation, it's all woven together.
So for you, our listener, the goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to really dissect these interconnected legal and political threads. We want to shed light on what all this could mean for, the rule of law itself.
And the power dynamics, too. State versus federal actors,
Yeah.
and just the ongoing saga between these two, right?
Definitely. Okay, let's get into it. Starting with these mortgage fraud allegations against Letitia James, what exactly are they saying happened?
Okay, so the core thing, based on documents reportedly obtained by Fox News, is this. The Trump administration, through the FHFA director, William Pulte, made a criminal referral to the Department of Justice about Letitia James.
A criminal referral. So not charges yet, but a flag saying, look into this.
Precisely. The FHFA is basically telling the DOJ, we think a crime might have happened here, you should investigate. And the allegation that James falsified info on mortgage applications for a place in Virginia.
Okay. Falsified how? To get better loan terms? Is that the idea?
That's the allegation, yeah. To meet the lending requirements and get a better deal.
And what specific actions are they pointing to?
Reports mention two main things. First, allegedly listing that Virginia property as her primary residence on the applications.
Okay. And the second?
And this one's raised a few eyebrows. The accusation is she listed her father as her husband on those mortgage documents.
Wow. Okay. Her father as her husband. That's quite specific.
It is. And this info, like you said, reportedly surfaced via Fox News' The Ingram angle.
Right. And I imagine that stirred up some commentary.
Oh, definitely. Jonathan Turley, the legal analyst, often on Fox, he jumped on what he sees as a pretty big irony here.
Which is?
Well, you have James, right, who successfully went after Trump for, among other things, allegedly making false statements to banks and financial institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's facing accusations that sound, well, pretty similar.
Yeah, the parallel is hard to miss. Did Turley think these documents were serious?
He seemed to. He told Laura Ingraham that using what he called the Letitia James standard, basically, the scrutiny she applied to Trump, these documents look quite damning.
The Letitia James standard. Okay.
Yeah, and he even brought up a recent Supreme Court case, Thompson. It made this distinction between knowing false statements and misleading statements.
Ah, okay. Knowing versus misleading. What's the difference there, and where did Turley place James's alleged actions?
So Thompson basically clarified, there's intentionally saying something false, and then they're saying something that, well, maybe not a direct lie, could still lead someone down the wrong path, mislead them.
Gotcha.
Turley's take is that James's alleged actions, like the father-husband thing, would probably fall into that misleading statements category. Even if not an outright falsehood, it could be seen as misleading to secure the loan.
Which, under the standards she supposedly used for Trump, would still be problematic in his view.
That's his argument, yeah, that it's problematic under the very legal ideas she emphasized in the Trump case.
Interesting distinction. And weren't these allegations floating around before this referral?
Yeah, apparently Paul Murrow, he's a retired NYPD inspector, now a Fox contributor, mentioned he'd reported on this stuff on his Substack maybe 10 weeks earlier.
So, not entirely out of the blue for some people.
Seems not. Suggests these claims were, circulating in certain circles for a bit.
And the DOJ. Have they weighed in on this referral from the FHFA?
As far as the reports we have go, nope. DOJ hasn't made any public comment to Fox or anyone else about it. So, still very early days on that front.
Okay. So that's the situation with James. Now, shifting gears. Predictably, Donald Trump had something to say about this.
Almost immediately, yeah. He went on Truth Social, called James a totally corrupt politician, said she should resign right away.
And he linked to an article about the allegations I saw.
Yep, linked a New York Post piece covering it all.
And James's office. They responded.
They did. A spokesperson put out a statement, called Trump a bully, said his focus is on weaponizing the federal government against the rule of law, the Constitution.
Strong words.
Yeah, they basically said James is committed to protecting New Yorkers and won't be intimidated.
This whole exchange, it feels like it fits into that broader pattern we've seen discussed, right?
Yeah.
Trump targeting people he sees as political enemies.
Absolutely. There's that analysis by CRW, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. They looked at Trump's Truth Social posts from January 23 to April 24.
And what did they find?
A lot. They documented, I think, at least 25 instances where Trump directly or indirectly threatened to use federal power against Joe Biden if he got a second term.
25 instances. Wow. And what kind of threats?
Range from suggesting FBI raids, investigations, all the way to potential indictments, even jail time.
And it wasn't just Biden in the crosshairs, was it?
No. The pattern extended. He talked about potentially prosecuting Obama for things done in office, targeted Democrats broadly, even nonprofits helping immigrants, election workers, anyone tied to his claims about the 2020 election, really.
The rhetoric itself was pretty stark, too, from what I recall.
Oh, yeah. Things like, if you go after me, I'm coming after you. Warnings about a Pandora's box of retribution opening up.
He even linked his own indictments to potential future actions against Biden, didn't he?
He did. Said his indictments set a bad precedent for yourself, Joe. Basically implying, what goes around comes around if he's back in power. He even called for a special counsel to investigate Biden, specifically asking for someone who hates Biden as much as Jack Smith hates me.
And talked about indicting Democrats generally if reelected.
Explicitly, yeah. And it hasn't just been talk, right. There have been actions that seem to align with this.
Like what?
Well, the reporting points to the Trump administration going after Maine. Remember when Maine didn't follow his executive order on transgender athletes?
No.
DOJ sued them. Federal education funding got suspended. And there was also the suspension of some DOD officials over leaks. Could be seen as tightening control, maybe targeting perceived internal adversaries.
So placing this criminal referral against James within that context, it certainly adds a layer of potential political motivation, or at least raises the question.
It definitely raises the question of retribution, yeah, given the history.
Okay. So let's shift again slightly. Back to the civil fraud case James won against Trump. Huge judgment there. He's appealing, but there's this whole drama around the bond he posted, right?
That's right. The judgment was massive, over $464 million. Got reduced to $175 million for the bond requirement during the appeal. And that $175 million bond is now a big issue.
We saw that Reddit discussion you mentioned. What were the main worries people were raising there? And James's office is formally challenging it too.
Yes, the AG's office has officially asked the judge to reject the bond. They're arguing it's just not adequate.
Inadequate how? What are the specifics?
Several big concerns popped up in that Reddit thread. One major one was about who actually pays if Trump loses the appeal. Early reports suggested the agreement might mean Trump pays, not the bonding company itself, Nat Specialty Insurance Company.
That seems odd for a bond.
It does.
Yeah.
And even beyond the wording, there are serious questions about Knight's financial muscle. Their reported policyholder surplus, that's like their safety cushion, right?
Their readily available cash to pay out claims.
Exactly. It's reportedly around $138 million, which is, less than the $175 million bond they issued.
They might not actually have the cash on hand to cover the full amount if needed.
That's the concern, yeah. It raises a big red flag about their ability to pay out if Trump's appeal fails. Do they have enough liquid assets?
Definitely a worry. What else came up in that discussion?
Well, there's the fact that Knight Specialty is apparently relying on a reinsurance deal, basically insurance for the insurer, and that reinsurance is with a parent company registered in the Cayman Islands.
Oh, offshore.
Right. And questions were raised in the thread about the financial stability and the supposed surplus of that Cayman parent company. So it adds another layer of uncertainty, maybe opacity.
So doubts about the primary bonder and the reinsurer. And the AG is echoing these concerns officially.
Exactly. The AG's motion to reject the bond is based squarely on these kinds of issues: the surplus, the reliance on reinsurance, the overall financial capacity.
And if the judge agrees, if the bond is deemed inadequate or even fraudulent, what happens then?
Well, Trump could be ordered to get a new valid bond, and maybe really quickly some reports mention potentially just 7 days.
That's a tight deadline.
Very. And if he fails to post a valid bond in time, that could pave the way for James's office to start enforcing the original judgment, meaning they could start trying to seize his assets to cover the debt.
A huge potential consequence. And does this bond mess affect the appeal itself?
It could, yeah. Remember, the judgment enforcement was paused, stayed, right? But that stay was conditional.
Conditional on what?
On Trump's team perfecting the appeals for the September 2024 term, basically getting all the paperwork and requirements sorted for the appeal to proceed formally.
I see.
So the worry highlighted in the Reddit discussion is, could these bond problems, if it's rejected, if they can't secure a new one, actually stop them from meeting those conditions? And if so, does the stay on enforcement just disappear?
So the whole appeal could be in jeopardy, along with his assets being at immediate risk.
It potentially throws a huge wrench into the works, yeah.
Fair.
Far beyond just the money.
Okay, this is already incredibly complex. Now let's add one more dimension. The whole state versus federal power dynamic. And this is where that old case, Ex parte Young, comes in, from 1908.
Right. It seems ancient, but Ex parte Young really grappled with some core questions about state versus federal authority, especially when you're talking about suing state officials like an attorney general.
And how does it connect here? Is it the main ruling or something else?
Well, the main ruling allowed certain suits against state officials to proceed in federal court, but for our context, the dissenting opinion from Justice Harlan back then is particularly interesting.
Okay, Harlan's dissent. What was his main point?
Harlan basically argued, look, if you sue a state official in their official role to stop the state from doing something like enforcing a state law or pursuing a case.
Like James pursuing the Trump fraud case.
Potentially, yeah. Harlan argued that's really just a lawsuit against the state itself wearing a disguise. And he felt that violated the 11th Amendment.
The amendment that generally gives states immunity from being sued in federal court by private parties without consent.
Exactly. He thought it was an end run around state sovereignty. His view was state courts can handle constitutional questions just fine. Let them deal with it. Don't let federal courts interfere like this.
So he saw it as protecting the states from federal overreach.
Precisely. He thought the majority was making a kind of artificial distinction between the official and the state. Though it's worth noting the commentary around the case does point out that suing local governments is generally okay. Under the 11th Amendment, they're seen as more like corporations.
Interesting side point. So how does Harlan's century-old concern about federal courts potentially overreaching connect to a federal agency referring a state AG for potential prosecution today?
It's not a perfect one-to-one parallel, obviously. Ex parte Young was about federal courts stopping state officials. Here, it's a federal executive branch entity, the FHFA, making a referral to another federal entity, the DOJ, about a state official.
Right. Different mechanism.
Different mechanism, but it touches that same nerve, the underlying tension. Could this federal involvement, the referral, potential DOJ action, be seen as the federal government interfering in the work of a state's chief law enforcement officer, especially given the political heat and the history here?
Kind of echoing Harlan's worry about federal power stepping on states' toes, even if the legal posture is different?
Sort of, yeah. It raises that question. Does this federal referral, in this specific highly charged context, push against those long-standing debates about the right balance between federal and state authority? Even the majority in Ex parte Young admitted these jurisdictional questions involving states were delicate, important stuff.
So it prompts us to think about whether this action, intended or not, could be seen as blurring those lines, especially when potential political motives are being suggested.
Exactly. It just adds another layer of constitutional or at least structural complexity to the whole picture.
Okay. It really is a tangled web. So let's try to pull these threads together. What are the key takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, first, we've got this new flashpoint, the mortgage fraud referral against Letitia James. It lands right in the middle of her ongoing conflict with Trump.
And given Trump's history and rhetoric, it immediately fuels speculation about political retribution, whether justified or not.
Right. Second, the spotlight on Trump's $175 million bond. The questions about its adequacy, the solvency of the issuer, the Cayman reinsurance, it just highlights the intense financial and legal scrutiny he's under from that civil case. It's not over yet.
And the Ex parte Young connection.
That serves as a reminder, really, a historical anchor showing that these tussles over state versus federal power, especially when state officials are targeted legally, are not new. There's this long history of debate about the boundaries, the balance.
It adds that crucial context. Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. Considering everything we've discussed, the bitter history between James and Trump, Trump's explicit statements about using government power against enemies, how does this latest move, this mortgage referral against James, actually land?
Yeah, how might it affect public perception? Is it seen as, okay, finally, accountability cuts both ways? Or does it just look like more political score settling, further muddying the waters between law and politics?
And thinking longer term, what could this mean for the independence of state AGs, state law enforcement generally, if federal entities get involved in situations like this, especially when the political backdrop is so intense?
Could it have a chilling effect? Or is it just the normal workings of overlapping jurisdictions? Lots to consider there.
Definitely a lot to think about. We really encourage you to check out the sources yourselves and keep following how all these legal and political threads continue to unravel. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.